Hi, and welcome to this Pilates session for teenagers. My name's Helena, and I'm a Pilates instructor and a children's physio based here in Swansea. Before taking part in this Pilates session, please make sure that you've got a clear, safe environment to exercise in. Also, make sure that an adult is nearby to help you if needed. Remember, listen to your body and only do the exercises that you are comfortable doing. And if you have got any concerns or questions, have a chat with the physiotherapist who recommended these exercises to you. And more than anything, enjoy the session. Welcome to this Pilates session, which will be suitable for young people aged 11 and over. So we're going to start in standing for our warm-up. So let's have a little check of our feet first of all. We want our feet underneath our hips and our knees nice and soft. And when we're standing through our feet, what we want is to have our weight equal underneath one foot and the other. Now, let's come and place our hands on the brim of our pelvis. This is our pelvis here, and I'm just going to turn to the side so you can see why we're doing this. So I want you to imagine that your pelvis is a full bowl of water. And if we're to slump down through the bottom of our spines, we're tipping that bowl of water out the back. And then if we're to grow really, really tall, we're then tipping that water out the front. And what we want really is to be halfway in between when we're not tipping the water forwards or backwards. And that's what we call our pelvis neutral, or in the middle, the best position for our pelvis to be when we're sitting or standing. We're going to rest our arms down by our sides. We want our rib cage nice and stacked on top of the pelvis, collarbones nice and wide, tips of the shoulders drawn down away from the ears. And I want you to imagine that your shoulder blades at the back are two blobs of butter melting down your spine in the hot summer sun. We're also now going to think about our neck and into our head. And our head is a helium balloon filled with air, lifting towards the ceiling. And that will give you a sense of lift and length through the spine, all the way through out the crown of the head. Now, a really important part of every day is breathing. And so an important part of our Pilates exercises is how we breathe. So I want you to place your hands in the lower part of your rib cage. Keep the shoulders down. And take a wide breath into the bottom of the rib cage, filling those lungs with as much air as you can. And then let that air out. Big breath in, wide breathing to the bottom of the rib cage, keeping those shoulders nice and relaxed and down towards the waist. And out. Now we're going to challenge our balance a little bit more. So we're going to take a big breath in, and as we let that breath go, we're going to grow even taller up onto our tiptoes. And then we're going to gently place our heels back down on the floor. We're going to go to that again, up onto the tiptoes, grow, 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 nice and tall through the whole of the spine, out the crown of the head. And then gently place those heels back onto the floor. It's really important with this exercise that you control that heel rise and that you don't swing up onto the tiptoes and then swing back down. So nice and controlled. We've got one more before we add some extra little challenges into this. Up onto those toes, nice and steady, and then place those heels down. So let's see if we can add some arms to this as we float the arms up, growing tall through the whole body, reaching right through to the fingertips. And then control the heels down and let the arms rest down by your side. Lovely. And grow nice and tall up onto the toes. Reach through the fingertips. Keep the shoulders drawn down. And then let the heels rest down on the floor and the arms down by your side. And again, one more. Reach tall through those arms. And then let those heels rest down onto the floor. Now, let's make it a little bit harder. So we're going to grow up onto those tiptoes, reaching the arms to the ceiling. Let's stay up lovely and tall as we circle one arm round and down, and the other arm round and down. And then place the heels nice and gently back onto the floor. Keep a little check that both feet are equally in contact with the floor. So we're growing up onto the tiptoes, reaching through those arms, nice and tall through the fingertips. Circle one arm round and down. And we're going to circle the other arm round and down. And let's place our heels back onto the floor. One last one. Grow up onto the tiptoes. Reach those arms as you float them towards the ceiling. Circle one arm round and down and the other. Fantastic. And then let those heels rest onto the floor. Let's work these legs a little bit harder now. So what we're going to do is go down into a mini squat. Now, keep a little check on this pelvis, this imaginary bowl of water. As you go down into that mini squat, sometimes we can sink a little bit in our lower back. We want to make sure that that bowl of water is in the middle, not sinking and tipping out the back and not arching and tipping out the front. So we're down into that mini squat. Keep a little check as well on those knees, making sure those knees are aligned over your feet in between the first and the second toe, and keep the shoulders down. So we've got a bit more of an ankle challenge now. We are going to come up onto our tiptoes, and if you want your hands on your hips to give you a bit of balance, that is fine. So we're going up onto the tiptoes, and then we're lowering the heels down. Well done. We're going up onto the tiptoes and lower the heels down. And we're going to gradually build on this. But if at any point it's a little bit too much for you, bring it right back to this, okay? But what we can do is go up onto the tiptoes and then grow really tall and then place the heels nice and firmly back on the floor. So we're down into our mini squat. We're going up onto the tiptoes. Make sure you can feel all those muscles in those legs working to give you a good, strong base of support. Down into that mini squat. Raise those heels. Nice and tall through those legs up onto the tiptoes. And place the heels down. And again, one last one before we change direction. So we're going to raise those heels. Nice and tall through those legs and pop the heels down. So we're going to do it the other way now. So we're going to start with a heel raise, and then as the heels are up, we're going down into that mini squat, a bit more of a challenge for those legs. Then place the heels back onto the floor and then grow nice and tall back into normal standing. So we're going up onto our tiptoes. And we're going to let those knees and those hips bend. Keep that pelvis nice and level, that bowl of water still and in the middle. Lower the heels down and grow nice and tall. And one last one onto the tiptoes. Let the hips and the knees bend. Lower the heels down and grow nice and tall. Now, let those legs have a bit of a break. They'll be warmed up a little bit. Ready for our lunges, okay? So now I'm going to step forward onto the mat because I want to make sure I've got a bit of space in front and to the side, and make sure you've got that space too, because we're going to go into doing some lunges. If you want to, place your hands onto the pelvis to give you help with your balance. We're then going to pick up one foot and step it forward, and then allow your hips and your knees to bend, lunge down, press that foot through the floor to come back up and step back. And we're going to use the same leg to come out to the side and lunge down, press that foot through the floor to come back. And then we're going to come forwards again, forwards with that leg, make sure we're up nice and tall, down towards the floor, press that foot through the floor and come back. And then out to the side, and we're going to lunge to that side. Keep a check on that knee, that it's over the big and the second toe and not rolling inwards or outwards. Press through that foot and come back to the middle. We've got one more set on this side. forwards, down, press the foot through the floor and come back, out to the side, down, press the heel through the floor to come back. We've got the same for the other side now, so we're stepping the opposite leg forwards, allow the hips and the knees to bend, keep the rest of you nice and tall, really keep a check that you don't bend forward with these lunges. So we're down towards the floor, press that foot to come back. And then we're stepping out to the side, we're going to lunge, keep that knee between the first and the second toe, press the foot through the floor to come back. Back in front, step forward, down towards the floor, press that foot, come back to the center, out to the side, down, press that foot through the floor, back to the center, one more, forwards and to the side, leg forwards, down to the floor, press and back to the middle, and one last one, out to the side. Let that foot press into the floor to bring yourself back to the middle. Now, let's give a bit more of a stretch to the upper part of our body. So, standing nice and tall as we have been, we're going to float our arms up towards the ceiling. Nice long fingers, look up to the tips of those fingers, and imagine that someone is hanging a ladder down from the ceiling and you're going to climb up that ladder one rung at a time. So we're going to reach one arm up and then the other arm's going up to the next rung of the ladder and then the next rung of the ladder. And what we're looking for is a lovely opening out of this side of your body. And we're going to reach up. Next rung, we're climbing taller and taller. One more each side. And the next one. And let's circle those arms round and down. Now, a bit more of a stretch into the shoulders and the upper back now. We're going to let our knees and our hips give a little bit so they're soft. Keep the knees lined up over the first and the second toe. And what we're going to do, we're going to slide one arm down one thigh, but just make sure that your weight is still through both feet the same and that you haven't brought your weight across one more than the other. So we're going to slide down and then we're going to roll round to the middle. Now, the top part of our back right into our necks will be rounded and hanging forward. And I want you to imagine your arms are like a rag doll, just hanging there nice and loose. We're going to take a big breath in, and then as we breathe out, we're building that spine bone by bone all the way up nice and tall. And the same for the other side. We're going to let the hips and the knees go. Little slide down, roll round to the middle. Nice and loosely, big breath in. And as we breathe out, we're going to build our spine open through the chest. And finally allow the head and the neck to come up nice and tall. We're going to go one more each side to really get into that mid-back. Slide down, roll round to the middle. Big wide breath into the bottom of your rib cage. And then rebuild that spine bone by bone, all the way up nice and tall. And then one last one, hopefully starting to feel a bit warmer through that mid-back and into those shoulders. Slide down, roll round to the middle, big breath in, and then rebuild that spine. One bone at a time, nice and tall. Right, now, we're going to let the hips and the knees bend a little bit more for this next one. We're going to have our arms in front, bit of a bend through those elbows, keeping wide through the collarbones. So a little bit of a bend there, but make sure that these hips stay facing forward. And I want you to imagine that you've got car headlights on the front of both hips, so we're not shining them round side to side, but that they stay shining forwards. So we're going to take a big breath in. And as we breathe out, we're going to glide one arm back as we rotate the mid-back round. Big deep breath to hold that lovely stretch into the middle of your back. And And then breathe out as you glide that arm back and come back facing forwards. Big deep breath. And as you let that breath go, we're going to glide the other arm back and rotate that mid back round. Keep facing forwards in the hips, big deep breath. And then as you let that breath go, coming back to the middle. We're going to go for one more each side. That mid back, almost imagine that you've got a torchlight on the breastbone and that's shining round to the side, but these lights are still shining forwards. Round to the side, big deep breath. And then as you breathe out, back to the middle. And we've got one more to the other side. Big deep breath, getting into that mid back, often a really stiff area of our spines. It's important to keep it lovely and mobile. Good, and come back up, shake those legs out. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to go into the end of our mats and just make sure when you're doing this at home that you've got a nice space in front of you that's clear, because when we roll down, we're going to be coming onto our backs. So, standing nice and tall, we're going to start with a big deep breath in. And as we breathe out, we're going to nod our chin to our chest and roll smoothly forwards, imagining our spine is a wheel rolling and rolling and rolling. If you need to soften your knees a bit, that's fine. Let the arms hang loose. And we're going to take a big breath in. And as you let that breath go, we're building our spine back up tall. So we're drawing the tailbone down and building each bone of our spine, bone by bone by bone, back up nice and tall. Ready for our next one. We've got a big breath to start. As we let that breath out, chin to chest, roll nice and smoothly forwards, all the way down. We're getting a lovely stretch through the whole of that spine. Big deep breath. And as you breathe out, build that spine bone by bone, back up tall. Lovely. And this next roll down is going to take us all the way onto the mat. So big deep breath. And then as we roll down, we're really thinking of each bone of that spine, really getting a lovely stretch in between it, all the way through those joints and those muscles that run down the whole spine. And when you come down, I'm going to come forward and then onto your backs, making sure that you've got a little cushion or a folded towel supporting the back of your head. Now it's really important that that towel isn't resting behind your neck, that it's resting just here in the bony part, the back of the head, because what you want to be able to do is gently nod your chin towards your chest, not too much, just a little way, so that you're lengthening your neck into that little gap underneath. Now we've come down onto the mat, let's have a little check of some of the important parts of our body and what position they should be in now we've changed position. So if we think about that imaginary bowl of water from when we were standing, now we've come down onto our back, I want you to imagine that that bowl of water is now resting on your lower tummy. And we want to make sure that your back and your pelvis are in that neutral or middle position. So what we can do to check that that's the case, we can imagine that bowl of water, first of all, is tipping and tilting forwards over our legs. And you'll find that that lower back arches a little bit away from the floor. And then we're going to tip and tilt it back towards you. And your lower back will be flattening into the floor. So we're going to do that just a few times to warm up lower down in the back and into the pelvis as we tip that bowl of water out the front and tip the bowl of water out the back. So that will be arching our lower back and then flattening it into the mat underneath. Let's do that a few more times just to get used to what that feels like. Forwards and backwards. And what we're looking for is to rest halfway in between, where that bowl of water is nice and level, it's not tipping forwards or backwards. And what you'll find is there's just a tiny gap between your lower back and the mat, just enough. If someone was to ever so slightly try and put their fingers a little way under, they could get them there. They shouldn't be able to get their fingers all the way under, but also the lower back shouldn't be so squashed down into the mat that they can't get their fingers anywhere near it. And that'll feel different for everybody, and you'll find out where that feels right for you. So you can either have your fingers on either side of your pelvis, or you can have your arms resting long on the floor. And we're going to start challenging that position a little bit more. And I want you to really keep thinking about that bowl of water all the way through these exercises lying down, because you don't want to spill that bowl of water. So we're going to start off with a nice wide breath into the bottom of the rib cage. And as you let that breath go, we're going to float one leg up so that your knee is over your hip. We're going to take a big breath in, and as you let that breath go, we're going to place that foot back down onto the floor. We're going to go then to the other side. So get your breath in to be ready, and then as you breathe out, we're going to float that leg up. And then we're going to place it back onto the floor. So if you can imagine it, it's like a very slowed down version of walking, okay? And we're really challenging how much control we've got around our middles, our lower back and our pelvis, whilst moving our legs in that kind of walking pattern. So with each movement, as you let that leg come up, make sure that that lower back hasn't flattened into the floor, that bowl of water hasn't tipped towards you. And then as you go down, make sure that bowl of water doesn't tip away from you. So here, you should stay lovely and still. Fantastic. Now we're going to make it a bit more challenging. So we're going to place that leg up with the knee over the hip, and then we're going to lengthen the leg away from us. And then we're going to fold it back in, and then place it back down on the floor. And let's go with the other leg now. So we're going to fold that leg up, knee over the hip, and then let that leg lengthen away, and fold it back, and place it back down onto the floor. So we can add a couple more bits to this exercise to make it a bit harder if you feel you want to. We can have our arms towards the ceiling, and then we can lengthen the legs away, keep the arms nice and still. Just make sure that we haven't closed our chest down, so we want to keep the chest nice and open and the elbows a little bit bent. But all the time we're keeping an eye on what's happening here, that we're not tipping and tilting that bowl of water. Fantastic. Now, if you do feel up for this next challenge, what we can do is, as you lengthen that leg away from you, you can lower the arms overhead. And then you can bring them back to the middle when you fold the leg back in. And the reason why that's an extra little challenge is because when you lower the arms overhead, sometimes this part of you wants to arch with it, and then you lose this lovely stable base that you're working on. So we want to keep a little eye on what's going on here with that bowl of water, even more than we were when we were just doing our legs only. One more each side. One last one, reach overhead, nice long leg all the way through to that big toe. Fold that leg back in, and then rest the arms down by your side. Okay, now we're going to take the head cushion out so that your head is resting just on the floor, and walk your feet a little bit further back towards your bottom, resting your arms down by your side. And I'm going to go into an exercise called the shoulder bridge. So I want you to think about this bowl of water here now. And actually, to start the shoulder bridge, you are going to tip that bowl of water towards you, because you're going to flatten your lower back into the floor before we come up. So you're starting with that bowl of water nice and level, and then we're tipping it towards you because we're flattening through the lower back, press the heels into the floor as you peel your spine, imagining each bone of your spine is coming up bone by bone until you're resting just below your shoulder blades. Big deep breath to hold, and then as you breathe out, I want you to imagine that each bone of your spine is coming back onto the floor bit by bit until you're back resting at the start where that bowl of water is level and not spilling. And again, big breath in. And as you breathe out, flatten through that lower back, tip that bowl of water towards you, press the heels through the floor as you peel that spine up into the air. Big, wide breath to hold. And then as you let that breath go, imagine each bone of your spine is being placed back down onto the floor bit by bit. And one more before we add some other little challenges to this shoulder bridge. Big breath in at the top, and then down we go, bone by bone, just until you're back into the middle. Now what you can do is have your arms across your chest, and that adds a little bit more of a challenge to the exercise. Exactly the same way of doing the shoulder bridge, but we've taken our hands away from the floor, which we're adding a little bit of stability when we were working at the first level. And again, keep checking that your breathing is nice and wide into the bottom of your rib cage. And sometimes it can be really easy to start holding your breath when an exercise becomes a bit tricky. And if you do find that you're starting to hold your breath for some of the exercises, that tells you that you're working ever so slightly too high a level, and peel it back to one of the more basic levels. So we can make this one a little bit harder if you want to. We can have our arms towards the ceiling, and we can come up into our shoulder bridge and stay up, and then we can have one arm out to the side and back to the middle. Keep that bridge up, make sure it's not tipping and tilting or sinking down. Arm out to the side and back, and then slowly come back down onto the floor. And up we go again. Raise the arms up towards the ceiling, nice long fingers. One arm out to the side and back to the middle. Keep the chest nice and open, elbows a little bit bent. Arm out to the side and back. And if you want to challenge the bottom muscles a little bit further and challenge that core a little bit further, you can stay up on the bridge and carry on with arms out to the side and back to the middle. So it's entirely your choice and what you feel your body is ready for. Now there is one more level of this shoulder bridge that we're going to do, but I want you to make sure that if you try this next level that you're ready for it. So when you go up into this level, we're going to make sure that you're nice and strong through one side, really working through the buttock muscle of that strong supporting side, and you're going to lengthen the other leg out away from you. And it's really important when you've done that you don't let that bridge tip and tilt. So we're then folding that leg back in, keep that bridge nice and level, and then let the bridge come down, imagining each bone of the spine placed back on the mat, bone by bone. We're then going to come back up into our bridge. Make sure we're strong through that supporting leg, and we're lengthening the other side away. Have a little glance down and check that you haven't let that bridge rock to the side. And then fold that leg back in and down. We're going to do one more each side before we move on. If at any point you feel you're holding your breath or that something doesn't feel quite right working at this next level, just come back to the normal bridge. Maybe add the arms in if you feel you want to. It's absolutely up to you and where you feel you're best working at today. And we've got one last one. And let that bridge rest nice and gently back down onto the floor. Now, we've worked quite a bit with that shoulder bridge, so we're going to hug our knees into our chest and rock side to side, just to give us a bit of a chance to recover. And let's also lengthen the legs out and lengthen the arms overhead for a full body stretch, right from the tips of our toes all the way to our fingertips. Breathing nice and wide and deep into our fingertips. Okay, and now when you're ready, we're going to come onto our side. So bring your little towel or cushion back, and we're going to place it between your head and this underneath arm. And we're going to go into an exercise called the clam. So we've got our knees bent and our feet super glued together. And now we've changed position, we want to just make sure that we're set up right before we do our exercise. So there should be a little gap between your waist and the floor. So I want you to draw that top hip away from your top shoulder and imagine someone's put a little marshmallow just between that waist and the floor, and you don't want to squash it. Have your fingertips resting ever so gently just in front of your tummy. And this exercise is going to work deep into those bottom muscles now. So we're going to take a wide breath into the bottom of the rib cage. And as you breathe out, we're going to open into that clam, making sure though that those hips stay facing forwards, and closing that clam. Squeezing into that top buttock muscle and letting that knee rest down. It's really important that we work the right muscle group with this exercise. So if you're not feeling it deep in that top buttock, if you're feeling it down the leg or anywhere else like the front of the leg, it's really important that you stop and reposition yourself until you feel it in the correct area. So that might be that you bring the knees up a little bit further or further down, or it might be that you roll the pelvis ever so slightly forwards. Whatever needs to be done, have a little check to make sure that you are feeling it in the correct place. And then gently place the fingertips back in front of the waist. Draw the top hip down away from the top shoulder. Little space there with that marshmallow that you don't want to squash, and carry on into that clam. So we're going to build the challenge up a little bit now into these bottom muscles here. So this will be our last clam. And then what we're going to do is lift that top leg up, making sure it's not too high, that is parallel to the underneath leg, okay? And we're going to glide it forwards, keeping that knee at a right angle at 90 degrees. And then we're going to glide it back just to there, not too far behind, okay? So we're gliding it forwards and we're gliding it back. And it's really important as well that as you glide it forwards that you don't let the leg drop. So I want you to imagine that someone's put a coffee table underneath that leg and you are polishing the top of that coffee table. So you're gliding the leg across to polish the top of that table, not letting that leg sink down into the table too far. Good, and hopefully we're feeling a little bit more of a workout into that top buttock muscle. Now, if it's a little bit too much to keep that leg up, what you can do to slightly change this exercise is to let the leg rest down in between each leg glide. So you can hover the leg up, you can glide it forwards, and then glide it back, and then just give yourself a little rest in between. That is absolutely fine. Got one last one before we've got now another balance challenge lying on our side. So we've got our legs out nice and long, and we're going to have our arm resting long on our side. Let's check that we are in a long line and not in a banana shape. So our feet, knees, hips and shoulders all the way through to the tips of our fingers are long, and our top arm is long, resting along the hip. What we're going to do is bring that top arm up towards the ceiling, and we're going to sweep it overhead to meet the underneath arm. And this one's called a torpedo exercise. So we're sweeping our arm up and overhead, keeping our balance while lying on our side. Now you might feel that you want to be wobbling forwards and backwards. And if it's just a little bit too hard, that's okay. What you can do is just ever so slightly bend the underneath knee, just to give you a little bit of extra support. That is fine. And like with all of our exercises in the Pilates, we are breathing nice and wide into the bottom of the rib cage and then letting that breath go. Breathing nice and easily, making sure we're not breath holding or tensing up through our shoulders into our necks. Lovely. Okay, now we're going to come up into sitting before we repeat all of those sideline exercises on the other side. Let's bring that cushion over the other side ready. So this is now going to be a stretch for the backs of our thighs, our hamstring muscles, which often get really tight in a lot of people. So what we're going to do is we're going to have one leg out and the other leg tucked in. Now actually, what you might find useful is bringing that folded towel and kind of perching yourself on the edge of it if you feel it's a bit tricky to sit up nice and tall. Entirely up to you. But we're going to have our arms out to the side, shoulders drawn down, elbows ever so slightly bent, and we are growing nice and tall from the base of the spine all the way up through the crown of the head, taking a breath in, and as we breathe out, we're going to rotate towards the side that the leg is outstretched, and we're going to fold down towards that leg, and we're going to hold that stretch so that you can feel those muscles all the way up the back of the calf, all the way up the back of the thigh, having a lovely stretch. Big breath in. And as you let that breath go, deepen a little bit further into that stretch. And again, big wide breath. And let that breath go as you go further into that stretch. If it's a little bit too sore, if your muscles are a little bit too tight there, feel free to have a slight bend in that knee. That is absolutely fine. And then we're going to come back up, come back to the middle. We're going to fold that leg back in and unfold the other one. Again, it's entirely up to you whether you want a bit of a bend there, if you are quite tight, as long as you can feel some stretch going through the back of the thigh and through the back of the calf. So we've got the arms out to the side, a little bit of a bend in those elbows, big wide breath. And as we breathe out, we're going to rotate round to that side and we're going to fold down towards that foot. Big deep breath to hold that big stretch. And let that breath go. And again, big deep breath. As you let that breath go, sink further down to that stretch. Don't worry if you feel you're tight more one side than the other. That's really normal in many, many people. One last breath in. And out, coming back up nice and tall. And back to the middle, folding the leg back in. So we worked this buttock. So we now need to go on the other side to work this side. So taking your head cushion back underneath the side of your head on top of the arm. We're going to set ourselves up ready for our clam on this side. Just a little recap. We want our feet, hips and shoulders in a nice long line. We've got imaginary car headlights on the front of the hips and they need to be shining forwards and not up towards the ceiling and back down. We want to draw that top hip away from the top shoulder. We've got a little bit of a space there that you want to put a marshmallow in, but don't squash it. And you can pop your fingertips just there to give you a bit of extra support. So we're starting with a big wide breath into the bottom of the rib cage. And as you breathe out, we're going to open up into that clam. And we're breathing in to lower, keeping those feet together, going up into that clam. And again, as we've said before, do make sure that you can feel it deep into that top buttock muscle. And if you can't, really important to stop and slightly change the position, as we've already mentioned earlier, until you can feel it in the right place. We've got a few more of these, and then we'll go into our side kick exercise. And hopefully starting to really feel those muscles working hard. These are really important muscles for stabilizing around our pelvis, especially when we are upright and we're walking and running. Really important to have good, strong bottom muscles on the outside here. Okay, we're going to go into our side kick. We're going to raise that leg up. Make sure it's not too high and it's parallel to the underneath. Take a big breath in. And as you breathe out, we're going to glide that leg forward, not too far. Keep it the same distance away from the floor throughout. And then gliding it backwards. Again, not out behind you, but just a little way behind from where you started. This is going to work these bottom muscles even further, okay? So if you do need to have a little bit of a break in between each rep, then you can just gently rest that leg down. Give yourself a little break before raising the leg back up and then gliding it forwards. And imagine you've got that coffee table there that you're polishing the top of with each glide forwards and each glide backwards. Fantastic. Okay. Right. We're into our torpedo now. So we're going to stack ourselves up on our side. Long legs, hips, shoulders, arm, resting long. We've still got that little space between the waist and the floor. That marshmallow is there, nice and snug, but not squashed. And we're going to take a big breath in. And as we breathe out, we're going to raise that top arm up and overhead to meet the underneath arm. And then we're going to sweep that arm round and down again. So we're looking at keeping our balance while lying on our side, but still at the same time having a lovely, relaxed, wide breathing pattern. If it's a little bit challenging, if you feel a bit wibbly wobbly, then just bend that underneath knee ever so slightly to give you a bit of support as you carry on. Reaching overhead and round and down. Lovely, one last one. Fantastic, well done. Okay, now we're going to change position again. We're going to come onto all fours. Okay, so we're now on all fours and we've got our hands ever so slightly forward from our shoulders. Our knees are underneath our hips and we want to make sure that our back stays nice and flat. A little bit of a drawing of that tailbone away from the crown of the head. And I want you to imagine that you've got a tray of your favourite drink resting across your lower back and you don't want to spill that drink. Nice and soft through the elbows, drawing the shoulders away from the tips of the ears. What we're going to do is glide those shoulder blades together and then press the hands into the floor and glide those shoulder blades apart. So we're really working those muscles in between the shoulder blades. Gliding the shoulder blades together and drawing those shoulder blades apart. And with each one, have a little check on that tray of drinks, because what you don't want to do is tilt that spine and tip the tray of drinks. So keep the tailbone lengthened away from the crown of the head. And then glide the shoulder blades apart, coming back onto your heels, reaching the arms forward, resting the head down, and gently sway side to side into your shell stretch, breathing nice and wide into the bottom of your rib cage. It's a really good chance to have a lovely stretch all the way through your shoulders as well, all the way through the arms and out the fingertips. Amazing. So we're going to come up now onto our knees and stretch the fronts of the thighs. Actually, I'm going to come to the side to do this so that you can see how important it is to get the right position for these stretches. So we'll start with one foot forward And that knee is underneath the hip, but we're going to gently lunge forward, not too far, because what we don't want is for this knee to be shot right over the tips of the toes. So it's ever so slightly forward, and here we're going to tuck our tailbone under as if we're tipping that imaginary bowl of water out the back. And you should start feeling a stretch through what we call the hip flexors, or the front of the hip. We're going to reach that arm up towards the ceiling. And if you've got your balance okay, we're going to ever so slightly tilt towards the other side. Now, you might want to get a chair or something to the side here to rest your fingertips on if you do feel a bit wobbly. That's absolutely fine. But we want to hold that stretch for a good 20 seconds to really get into the front of that hip. And as with all of our stretches, taking a big breath in, and as you let that breath go, sink further into that stretch. And then come back up to the middle. While we're in this position, it would be a good opportunity to stretch through the bottom muscles of this front leg. So if we can, we're going to fold that leg in this position and lengthen that opposite leg out behind us, and then we can settle down onto the floor in front, and hopefully we'll feel a deep stretch in to the bottom muscle of the leg that's folded in front. So just let yourself rest down onto the floor underneath and focus on your breath, holding this stretch just for about 20 seconds as we have done before. And then let's come back up tall. I'm going to turn round and we're going to stretch the opposite hip. So we're going to have the other foot in front now, making sure that the leg that's behind is the front of the hip that we haven't stretched yet. A little bit of a lunge forward, making sure we're upright through the rest of the body. A little bit of a tuck of the tailbone underneath. And then once we can start feeling that stretch across the front of that hip, we're going to reach one arm up to the ceiling. It's the arm the same side as the leg that's out behind us. And a little tilt towards the opposite side. And that will hopefully get you a lovely stretch all the way through that side and deeper into the front of that hip. Big wide breaths into the bottom of the rib cage. And then come back up tall. Stretching into the bottom muscle of this front leg now. We're going to fold that leg across, slide it forward, let that leg lengthen out behind, and then come forward and rest down here, hopefully feeling that stretch into the bottom muscle of that leg that's folded out in front. We're taking that breath wide into the bottom of your rib cage, and let that breath go. Well done. We're going to come back up now into kneeling and stretch through some of these shoulder areas before we come up into standing, winding down now, having worked really hard. So we're going to interlink our fingers and stretch the hands forward, imagining your shoulder blades are gliding around your rib cage. And whilst holding that stretch, again, taking that breath wide into the bottom of the rib cage, and let that breath go. Lovely. Reaching the hands to the ceiling, circle them round and down. We're going to come into a little crouch, tucking the toes underneath. And just as we rolled down onto the mat, we're going to rebuild our spine as we roll back up. So we are lowering our heels down to the floor. And we're rebuilding our spine. Just let the head, neck and shoulders and arms hang nice and loose. Rebuild the spine bone by bone, all the the way until you are nice and tall. Now, we've still got some other muscle groups we need to stretch. We worked our calf muscles really hard in the warm-up. So we want to step 1 foot forward and keep the heel down with the foot that's behind. A little bit of a lunge forward so that we can feel that stretch getting even deeper into that calf behind. And let's just roll through those shoulders, giving those shoulders a chance to rest and recover. Lovely, and step that foot back, opposite side, stepping forward, keep the heel of the foot down, of the foot that's behind. Have a little check that both feet are pointing the same direction, pointing forwards. Bit of a lunge forwards through the front foot, and this time we're going to roll those shoulders forwards instead of back. Up towards the ears, resting them down, rolling round and down. Keeping the heel of the foot down behind and really getting into that calf muscle that's worked so hard at the start of this class. Lovely, let the arms hang nice and loose and step back. We're going to go into a bit of a mermaid stretch before we finish. So let's let our hips and our knees bend. We're going to slide down, one arm down one side, reach the opposite arm up towards the ceiling, and this time we're going to reach it across and follow the fingertips round as we come round to the middle, arms nice and loose, and then build that spine back up lovely and tall. Same again for the opposite side. A little bit of a bend through the hips and the knees, slide the arm down, reach that arm up tall to the ceiling, and then follow those fingertips as they trace round and down to the middle. Roll nice and loosely before you come back up tall. We've got one more each side. So a little bit of a dip down, slide down, reach the opposite arm up to the ceiling, look to the fingertips and follow them as they trace round in a circle. Hang those arms down and then build your spine back up nice and tall. And then one more the other side as you let your hips and knees give. Slide the arm down, sweep the opposite arm up, look to the back of the hand, look to the fingers and follow those fingertips as they sweep round and down. Hang the body forwards just for a moment as you breathe wide into the bottom of the rib cage. And then as you let that breath go, grow back up nice and tall. Relax the shoulders down. And let's take a moment just to be aware of how we're breathing before we finish. And how we're standing through our feet, how we're bearing our weight through both feet, nice and soft through those knees. Keeping that pelvis in that middle position. Shoulders rested down, long through the back of the neck with that helium balloon head lifting you taller and taller. Taking a wide breath, wide into the bottom of the rib cage. And let that breath go. And well done, that brings us to the end of our session for today.